Hello, have you ever experienced the most cruel betrayal not from strangers, but from your own family? I'm Michelle, 29. On my birthday, at LA's most exclusive rooftop, my mother-in-law handed me a gold envelope. Cameras flashing, guests watching. Inside wasn't a gift, but divorce papers. Everyone waited for me to fall apart. Instead, I pulled out my own envelope, a dream job offer in San Francisco. In that moment, I knew she hadn't ruined me. She'd set me free. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from, and thanks for being here. I kicked off my shoes in the marble foyer of our Malibu home, well, Ryan's family home that we'd been living in since the wedding, and padded toward the kitchen in my spa uniform. The scent of Victoria's expensive Chanel perfume hung in the air like a warning sign. There she was, my mother-in-law, Victoria Wellington, sitting at our pristine white dining table with papers spread out in front of her, like she was conducting some kind of board meeting. Her perfectly manicured fingers held a red pen, and she was making notes in the margins of what looked like official documents. The concentration on her face was intense, almost predatory. When she heard my footsteps on the hardwood, Victoria looked up sharply. For just a split second, her expression wasn't the usual cool disapproval I'd grown accustomed to over the past 3 years. It was satisfaction. Pure, undiluted satisfaction. "Oh," she said, gathering the papers with surprising speed for a woman in her late 50s. "Michelle, dear, you're home early, dear." Victoria Wellington had never called me dear in the entire time I'd known her. Usually she avoided using my name altogether, referring to me as Ryan's wife, or simply she, when talking to others in my presence. The papers disappeared into a beautiful gold envelope with a silver ribbon, the kind you'd buy for someone you actually cared about. The whole thing looked expensive and thoughtful, which should have been my first red flag. Victoria Wellington didn't do thoughtful. She did calculated. "Just finishing up some family paperwork," she continued, smoothing the envelope with her fingers like she was admiring her own handiwork. "Nothing for you to worry about. Family paperwork. Right. Because nothing says family paperwork like sneaking around and hiding documents when someone walks in. I picked this envelope specifically for you," Victoria said, holding it up to catch the afternoon light streaming through our floor-to-ceiling windows. The gold foil gleamed against her diamond tennis bracelet. "For your birthday next week, I wanted something special." Special. The word tasted bitter in my mind. In 3 years of marriage to her son, Victoria had never shown interest in making anything special for me. Last year, she'd given me a gift card to Target. Not even wrapped, just handed over with a comment about how I'd probably find something useful there. But here she was talking about picking out an envelope specifically for me, putting effort into presentation. Either Victoria Wellington had undergone a complete personality transplant, or something was very, very wrong. "That's so thoughtful of you," I managed, trying to read her expression. "What's the occasion?" Victoria's smile was the kind you see in old movies, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Oh, it's something that will change everything, dear. Something I've been working on for quite some time. Change everything." The phrase hung in the air between us like smoke. I'd been hoping for years that something would change between Victoria and me. Maybe she'd finally see that I wasn't the gold digger she thought I was when Ryan first brought me home. Maybe she'd recognize that despite my lack of Ivy League education and trust fund, I genuinely loved her son and worked hard to build a good life with him. But the way she said it, with that strange anticipatory gleam in her eyes, made my stomach clench with dread. "I can't wait to see what it is," I lied, forcing a smile. Victoria tucked the envelope into her Hermes purse and stood up, smoothing down her perfectly pressed slacks. "Oh, you won't have to wait long. We'll be celebrating properly at your birthday dinner. I've made reservations at Skyline." Skyline, the most exclusive rooftop restaurant in downtown LA. The kind of place where you needed connections just to get a table. The kind of place Victoria usually said was wasted on people who couldn't appreciate fine dining. Skyline? Wow, that's incredibly generous. "Nothing's too good for family," Victoria said, and the way she emphasized the word family made it sound like she was saying goodbye to it. The front door slammed, and Ryan's voice echoed through the house. "Mom? Michelle? Anyone home?" "In here, sweetheart," Victoria called, her voice transforming into the warm, maternal tone she reserved exclusively for her son. Ryan appeared in the doorway, still wearing his charcoal suit from the law firm. At 32, he still had that boyish charm that had made me fall for him in the first place. Dark hair that fell just slightly over his forehead, green eyes that crinkled when he smiled. But lately those smiles had become rare, especially when his family was around. "How are my two favorite ladies?" he asked, but his eyes were on his mother, not me. "Just discussing Michelle's birthday plans," Victoria said, patting her purse where the mysterious envelope rested. "It's going to be very memorable." Ryan's face lit up with an excitement I hadn't seen in months. "Really? You're okay with the surprise?" Surprise. So Ryan was in on whatever Victoria had planned. My husband, who'd been growing increasingly distant lately, who'd started working late more often, who'd stopped defending me when his mother made her cutting remarks, he was part of this. "More than okay," Victoria assured him. "I think it's exactly what everyone needs." They shared a look that excluded me entirely, one of those silent conversations that families develop over decades. But instead of feeling left out, I felt something else entirely. A chill that started in my chest and spread outward. "Well, I should get changed," I said, backing toward the hallway. "Long day at the spa." "Oh, how is work going?" Victoria asked with false interest. "Still, massaging people." The way she said massaging people made it sound like I was doing something vaguely pornographic, instead of providing therapeutic services to some of the wealthiest people in Beverly Hills. This was Victoria's specialty, taking something legitimate and making it sound tawdry with just the right inflection. "It's going well," I replied evenly. "Mrs. Henderson asked specifically for me again this week. She says I'm the only one who can work out the knots in her shoulders from all that tennis." "How nice that you're so hands-on," Victoria said. And Ryan actually snorted with amusement. 3 years. 3 years of comments like this. And my husband thought they were funny. I escaped upstairs to our bedroom, the guest bedroom really, since Ryan had started sleeping in his childhood room more often than not. The space felt like a hotel room, beautifully appointed but impersonal, like I was just passing through. Sitting on the edge of the pristine white duvet, I tried to shake the feeling that something terrible was coming. Victoria's sudden interest in my birthday, Ryan's secretive excitement, that gold envelope hidden in her purse like a weapon disguised as a gift. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe this was finally the breakthrough I'd been hoping for. Maybe Victoria had decided to accept me as part of the family instead of treating me like a temporary inconvenience that would eventually be resolved. But as I looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the Pacific Ocean stretching endlessly toward the horizon, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to discover just how much the Wellington family truly thought of me, and honestly, part of me was almost curious to find out. Let me tell you about the first time I met Victoria Wellington. It was like walking into a movie set for How the Other Half Lives. Everything perfectly arranged, every detail calculated for maximum intimidation. Ryan had been building up the introduction for weeks. "Just be yourself," he kept saying, which is what people tell you when they know damn well that being yourself isn't going to be enough. The Wellington mansion sits on 2 acres in the most exclusive part of Malibu, the kind of place where the landscaping costs more than most people's houses. White columns, perfectly manicured gardens, and a circular driveway that screams old money, even though Victoria's family had only been wealthy for 2 generations. I'd spent 3 hours getting ready, which should have been my first clue that I was fighting a losing battle. When someone has to try that hard, it usually means the deck is already stacked against them. Victoria answered the door herself. No housekeeper, no staff, just her making a point about being hands-on when it suited her narrative. She was wearing what I now know was a casual $800 blouse and pants that cost more than my monthly rent at the time. Her blonde hair was pulled back in one of those effortlessly perfect styles that takes professional help to achieve. "You must be Michelle," she said, looking me up and down like she was evaluating a piece of furniture. "Ryan's mentioned you. Not Ryan's told us so much about you, or we've been looking forward to meeting you. Just mentioned you. Like I was something he'd brought up in passing between more important topics." The house tour was a masterclass in subtle intimidation. Every room had a story about family history, expensive art, or connections to important people. The wine cellar had bottles from Ryan's grandfather's collection. The library had first editions that had been in the family for decades. The living room featured a painting that had been acquired from a private collection in France. Meanwhile, I was a 26-year-old spa therapist from Van Nuys, whose idea of art was the motivational poster in my studio apartment. Dinner was served in a dining room that could have hosted a state dinner. Crystal glasses, silver cutlery, china that probably cost more than my car. Victoria had invited her closest friends, Dr. Patricia Manning, whose husband owned half the medical practices in Beverly Hills, Sandra Cross, who sat on the board of 3 different charities, and Elena Rodriguez, who ran an art gallery in West Hollywood. These women didn't just have money. They had the kind of social connections that could make or break reputations with a single phone call. "So Michelle," Dr. Manning said over the appetizer course, "Ryan tells us you work in wellness. Are you a doctor?" "I'm a licensed massage therapist," I replied, trying to sound proud instead of defensive. "I specialize in therapeutic and sports massage at Elite Wellness Center." The silence that followed lasted exactly long enough to be uncomfortable. I watched these women process the information, their expressions shifting from polite interest to barely concealed disappointment. "How practical," Sandra Cross finally said. "The way you might comment on someone's choice to shop at a discount store." Victoria jumped in with the kind of smoothness that comes from years of social maneuvering. "Michelle is still exploring her options, aren't you, dear? So many young women today take time to find their true calling. True calling, like working with my hands to help people with chronic pain, wasn't a legitimate profession, just a stopgap measure until I figured out what I really wanted to do with my life." "Actually, I love what I do," I said, probably a little too forcefully. "I've been doing it for 5 years, and I have clients who've been with me since I started. There's something really rewarding about helping someone who's been in pain for months finally find relief." Elena Rodriguez nodded politely, but I could see her mentally filing me under sweet but limited. "That's wonderful that you're so passionate," she said. "Have you considered expanding your skill set? Perhaps taking some business courses? The wellness industry has so many opportunities for growth these days." Translation: Your job is fine as a hobby, but you'll need something more substantial if you want to be part of this family. The conversation moved on to safer topics. Charity events, vacation plans, mutual friends. I sat there eating food I couldn't pronounce, listening to discussions about people and places I'd never heard of, feeling smaller with each passing minute. Ryan tried to include me, but his efforts were clumsy and somehow made everything worse. When they talked about their upcoming charity gala, he said, "Michelle gives great massages. Maybe she could donate a session for the silent auction." The suggestion hung in the air like a bad smell. These women bid on vacation packages to European villas and private art collections. A massage from the help wasn't exactly their idea of a coveted auction item. "That's very generous," Victoria said, with a smile that could have flash frozen water. "But I think this year's auction is already full." After dinner, while Ryan was in the kitchen helping his mother with dessert, Dr. Manning pulled me aside in the living room. "You seem like a sweet girl," she said, which immediately put me on guard because nothing good ever follows that phrase. "But I hope you understand the pressure Ryan is under. His career is really taking off, and Victoria has such high hopes for his future." "I understand," I replied, though I wasn't sure I understood anything at all. Good, because family reputation is so important in legal circles. Ryan's father built something really special with his firm, and Victoria has worked so hard to maintain their social standing since he passed. It would be such a shame to see all that hard work compromised. Compromised. By me. By my job, my background, my very existence in Ryan's life. When Victoria returned with dessert, some elaborate French pastry that probably required advance notice to prepare, she was all smiles and gracious hostess charm. But I caught the look she exchanged with Dr. Manning, the tiny nod that said, "Message delivered." The drive home was quiet. Ryan seemed exhausted, like the evening had drained him. "That went well," he finally said, which was such obvious bullshit that I almost laughed. "Did it? My mom really likes you. She told me so while we were in the kitchen." "What exactly did she say?" Ryan was quiet for so long that I thought he wasn't going to answer. "She said you were nice, and that you clearly care about me." Nice. The most damning word in the English language when it comes to first impressions. "But," I prompted, "but nothing. She likes you, Michelle. That's what matters." Except it wasn't what mattered, and we both knew it. What mattered was the careful distance Victoria had maintained all evening. The way she'd managed to make me feel welcome while simultaneously making it clear I didn't belong. What mattered was the message her friends had delivered, the subtle pressure campaign that had started before I'd even finished my appetizer. What mattered was that I'd walked into that house as Ryan's girlfriend and walked out feeling like an intruder who'd somehow managed to fool their way past security. But here's the thing about the Wellington family. They never said anything directly. They didn't have to. They had perfected the art of making their disapproval felt without ever having to own up to it. Over the following months, the pattern became clear. Family gatherings where I was invited but not included. Conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Compliments that somehow felt like criticisms. "Michelle, you look lovely tonight," Victoria would say at family dinners. "That dress is so affordable looking." Or, "I admire how hard you work, dear. It must be exhausting being on your feet all day." Or my personal favorite, "It's wonderful that you're so independent. Not every woman needs a husband to support her financially." Each comment was perfectly crafted to sound supportive, while delivering a tiny poison dart straight to my confidence. Victoria Wellington was a master of the backhanded compliment, the subtle dig, the kind of psychological warfare that left no fingerprints. The worst part was watching Ryan adapt to this dynamic. At first, he'd defend me, call out his mother's comments, make it clear that he was on my side. But gradually, month by month, he started to absorb their perspective. "Maybe you should consider going back to school," he suggested one night after a particularly brutal family dinner. "Not because your job isn't great, but because you're so smart. You could do anything you wanted." "I'm doing what I want," I replied. I know. I just think, maybe you could want something more, something better, something worthy of the Wellington name." By our first anniversary, Ryan had stopped talking about my work entirely. When people asked what I did, he'd say I worked in wellness and quickly change the subject. He'd stopped inviting me to firm events, claiming they were boring and I wouldn't enjoy them. Translation: my presence had become an embarrassment. The engagement came 18 months later, but even that felt like a defeat disguised as a victory. Victoria's reaction when Ryan announced it wasn't joy or excitement. It was resignation, the kind of expression you make when you realize you've lost a battle, but not the war. "Well," she said, raising her champagne glass with the enthusiasm of someone toasting a funeral, "I suppose congratulations are in order." The wedding planning was a masterclass in passive-aggressive control. Victoria offered to help, which sounded generous until you realized it meant she made every decision while making it seem like she was doing me a favor. "I know you probably dreamed of a big wedding," she said, during our first planning session, "but I think something intimate would be more appropriate." Intimate meant small. Small meant fewer witnesses to the family's obvious lack of enthusiasm about welcoming me into their ranks. The guest list was revealing. Victoria invited 43 people. My side had 12. My parents, my sister's family, and a handful of friends who could afford to take time off work for a Wednesday afternoon wedding. "Wednesday is so much more elegant than a weekend," Victoria explained. "Less commercial, more meaningful." Wednesday was also when most people couldn't attend, which meant the wedding photos would be dominated by Wellington family and friends, making it look like Ryan had married into my family rather than the other way around. The venue was Victoria's choice, a private club in Malibu where she'd been a member for 20 years. Beautiful, exclusive, and completely outside my family's comfort zone. My parents spent the entire reception looking like they were afraid to touch anything. But the real masterpiece was Victoria's mother of the groom speech. Standing in front of all those wealthy, influential people, she delivered what sounded like a warm welcome to the family, while actually being a subtle character assassination. "Michelle has brought such authenticity to our family," she said, making authenticity sound like a communicable disease. "She's taught us all about the value of honest work and simple pleasures." Honest work, simple pleasures. Code words for working class and unsophisticated. "Ryan has always had such a big heart," she continued. "Even as a little boy, he brought home stray animals, always wanting to help creatures that needed saving." The implication was clear. I was the latest stray animal Ryan had rescued, a project to be fixed rather than a partner to be celebrated. The applause was polite, the kind you give when you're not sure if you should be clapping, but everyone else is doing it. I smiled and nodded like a grateful recipient of their charity, because what else could I do? That night, lying in our honeymoon suite at the Four Seasons, I finally understood what I'd gotten myself into. I hadn't married into the Wellington family. I'd been absorbed by it, my identity slowly dissolving into their vision of who I should be. Ryan was already asleep beside me, exhausted from a day of playing the happy groom while managing his family's expectations. In the darkness, I could hear the ocean through our open balcony door, waves crashing against the shore in an endless, relentless rhythm. I'd spent so much energy trying to prove myself worthy of their acceptance that I'd forgotten to ask whether their acceptance was worth having. But by then, it was too late. I was Mrs. Ryan Wellington, and Mrs. Ryan Wellington's job was to become the person Victoria Wellington thought her son deserved, even if it killed the person I actually was in the process. The job hunting started 6 months after the honeymoon, when Victoria's comments about my career became less subtle and more frequent. I saw the most interesting article about career transitions, she'd say, conveniently leaving magazines about professional development on our coffee table. So many women are going back to school these days. Or psychic. Patricia's daughter just finished her MBA. She's working in marketing now, making quite good money. Education really opens doors, doesn't it? The message was clear. If I wanted to be a real Wellington, I needed to stop touching people for money and start doing something respectable. So I quit Elite Wellness Center. Walking out of that spa for the last time felt like leaving a piece of myself behind. For 5 years, those rooms had been my domain. I knew every client's problem areas, every preference, every story. Mrs. Chen always wanted lavender oil because it reminded her of her grandmother's garden. Mr. Rodriguez needed deep tissue work on his left shoulder from an old baseball injury. Jennifer Walsh came in every 2 weeks for stress relief because her job in finance was slowly killing her. I was good at what I did, really good. My client retention rate was over 90%, which was almost unheard of in the industry. People requested me specifically, waited weeks for appointments, paid premium rates for my time. But none of that mattered to Victoria because in her world, working with your hands wasn't working at all. The first job interview was at a marketing agency in Century City. Sleek glass offices, young people in expensive casual wear, the kind of place that probably had a ping pong table in the break room. The hiring manager was a woman about my age named Jessica, perfectly styled in what I was learning to recognize as professional chic. She looked at my resume for about 30 seconds before setting it aside. "So," she said, leaning back in her chair, "you have interesting background. Massage therapy. That's not something we see a lot of in marketing applications." I'd prepared for this question, rehearsed my answer about customer service skills and understanding client needs. But sitting in that sterile conference room, wearing a suit that cost more than I used to make in a week, the words felt hollow. "I've worked extensively with high-end clientele," I began. "The wellness industry requires a lot of relationship management, understanding individual needs, creating personalized experiences." Jessica nodded politely. "The way you do when someone is talking, but you've already made up your mind." "The thing is," she interrupted gently, "marketing is really about data analysis, campaign strategy, brand positioning. It requires a specific skill set that typically comes from education or direct industry experience. Translation, you're not qualified, and we both know it." The interview lasted 15 minutes. Jessica walked me to the elevator with the kind of professional courtesy that makes rejection feel almost polite. "We'll be in touch," she said, and we both knew she wouldn't. The second interview was for an administrative position at a law firm, not Ryan's firm, because that would have been too obvious, but a smaller practice that specialized in estate planning. The office was all dark wood and leather chairs, trying very hard to look established and trustworthy. The managing partner, a man in his 60s named Mr. Harrison, actually seemed interested in my background. "Massage therapy," he mused, reviewing my resume. "That's quite a change. What made you decide to transition into administrative work?" This question was trickier because the real answer, "My mother-in-law thinks my current job makes her family look bad," wasn't exactly professional. "I'm looking for new challenges," I said instead. "Opportunities to grow and develop different skills." Mr. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "The position requires a lot of client interaction, scheduling, intake forms, Managing sensitive information. Discretion is very important in estate planning. I absolutely understand. Client confidentiality has always been a priority in my current work. For a moment, I thought I had a chance. Mr. Harrison seemed to appreciate the client service aspect of my experience. We talked about scheduling systems, organization skills, attention to detail. Then he asked about my long-term goals. "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" he said. And I realized I didn't have a good answer because I'd never wanted to be in this position in the first place. "I'm interested in growing within the legal field," I said, improvising. "Learning about different areas of practice, maybe eventually pursuing formal paralegal training." It was the right answer, but it came out sounding rehearsed and insincere, probably because it was. Mr. Harrison's assistant called 2 days later to let me know they'd decided to go with someone who had more direct administrative experience. The third interview was at a boutique hotel in West Hollywood. Customer service manager, which seemed perfect given my background in hospitality and client relations. The property was beautiful, all modern luxury with a focus on personalized guest experiences. The general manager, a sharp woman named Lisa, actually got excited when she saw my spa background. "This is perfect," she said, spreading my resume on her desk. "You understand high-end service. You know how to read clients. You've worked in wellness. That's exactly what we're looking for in this market." Finally, someone who saw my experience as an asset instead of a liability. We talked for an hour about service standards, guest relations, team management. Lisa described their vision for the hotel, their plans for expansion, opportunities for advancement. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. "I have to be honest," Lisa said as the interview wound down. "This position requires some evening and weekend work. Hospitality doesn't really follow a 9-to-5 schedule. Would that be a problem?" "Not at all," I assured her. "I'm used to flexible hours." "Great, and just one more thing. The salary starts at $48,000 with performance bonuses and full benefits. Would that work for you?" $48,000 was actually more than I'd been making at the spa, even with tips, plus benefits, which I'd never had before. "That sounds perfect," I said. Lisa smiled and shook my hand. "I'll need to run it by the ownership group. But honestly, I think you're exactly what we've been looking for. Expect to hear from us by Friday." I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. This was it. The perfect compromise. A job that used my skills, paid well, and sounded respectable enough to satisfy Victoria's standards. Ryan was in the kitchen when I got home, making himself a sandwich between client calls. "How'd it go?" he asked, looking genuinely interested for the first time in weeks. "Really well. The manager loved my background, said it was exactly what they were looking for. Hospitality management at a boutique hotel." "That's great, babe," Ryan said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. Much more professional than... He caught himself, but we both knew how that sentence was going to end. Friday came and went with no call. Monday, I called Lisa's office and left a polite voicemail. Wednesday, I called again. The following week, I finally got through to her assistant. "Oh, I'm sorry," the young woman said. "Lisa asked me to call you last week. They decided to go with someone who had more direct hotel management experience. For an entry-level position that Lisa had said I was perfect for." By month 3 of my job search, the rejection emails had started to blur together. "Thank you for your interest, but we've decided to go with a candidate who, while your background is interesting," the worst part wasn't the rejections themselves. It was the gradual realization that Victoria had been right all along. My experience didn't translate. My skills weren't transferable. In the professional world that the Wellingtons inhabited, I was exactly what she'd always said I was, unqualified. Ryan's support, which had started out genuine, began to feel more like pity. "Maybe you're aiming too high too fast," he suggested after I told him about another rejection. "There's nothing wrong with starting at the bottom and working your way up." Starting at the bottom, after 5 years of building a successful practice, developing a reputation, earning good money, I was supposed to start at the bottom. Victoria's response to my job search struggles was a masterpiece of false sympathy. "Oh, honey," she said when she heard about my latest rejection, "I know this must be so discouraging. But remember, everyone has to start somewhere. Perhaps you could look into some entry-level positions. Reception work, filing, that sort of thing? Reception work. Filing. Jobs that paid less than half what I'd been making, required no skills, offered no advancement. The important thing, Victoria continued, is to get your foot in the door somewhere respectable. Build up your resume with more traditional experience. Traditional experience. Because helping people manage chronic pain wasn't traditional enough for the Wellington family standards. By month 6, I was broke. Not just low on money, actually broke. The job search had cost more than I'd expected. Professional clothes, gas for interviews across the city, resume printing, application fees for some positions. Meanwhile, I had no income coming in. Ryan started paying for everything, which should have felt supportive, but instead felt like another step toward complete dependence on his family's approval. Don't worry about money, he'd say, when I tried to contribute to groceries or utilities. Focus on finding the right opportunity. The right opportunity, as if I was being picky instead of systematically rejected by an entire industry. Victoria's friends started offering helpful suggestions that felt more like backhanded insults. You know, dear, Dr. Manning said at a family barbecue, Patricia's housekeeper is looking for additional cleaning work. She's very discreet, very reliable. It might be a good way to earn some money while you're figuring things out. Cleaning work. For a woman who'd been making $60,000 a year helping professional athletes and stressed executives manage their physical health. That's very thoughtful, I replied, but I'm still exploring professional opportunities. Of course, Dr. Manning said, patting my arm like I was a child who'd expressed interest in becoming an astronaut. It's wonderful that you have such high aspirations. High aspirations, like wanting to use my brain, was somehow unrealistic. The community college enrollment was Ryan's idea, presented as a solution to my lack of formal education. Business management, he said, showing me the course catalog. You could get your associate's degree, maybe transfer to a 4-year school eventually. It would give you the credentials these employers are looking for. Credentials. Because 5 years of successful client relationships apparently weren't credentials enough. So I enrolled. Business communication, introduction to management, basic accounting. Classes filled with 18-year-olds who called me ma'am and looked at me with polite confusion when I mentioned having work experience. The professors were kind, the material was interesting, and for 3 hours twice a week, I felt intellectually engaged again. But driving home from campus to the Wellington mansion, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was moving backward instead of forward. Victoria's response to my college enrollment was perfectly calibrated to sound supportive, while reinforcing my inadequacy. How wonderful that you're finally getting a proper education, she said, when Ryan told her about my classes. It's never too late to improve yourself. Finally getting a proper education. Improve yourself. The implication was clear. Everything I'd accomplished before didn't count as real achievement. The breaking point came during a family dinner 8 months into my job search. Victoria had invited her usual crowd, Dr. Manning, Sandra Cross, Elena Rodriguez, along with a new guest, Alexandra Morrison, Ryan's ex-girlfriend from law school. Alexandra was everything Victoria had always wanted in a daughter-in-law. Beautiful, brilliant, successful. She was a pediatric surgeon at Cedars-Sinai, came from old California money, and spoke 3 languages fluently. Alexandra just got back from a medical conference in Switzerland, Victoria announced, as we sat down to dinner. She presented research on minimally invasive heart surgery for children. Wasn't that exciting, Ryan? Ryan's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. That's incredible, Alex. You always were the smartest person in our class. Alex. He used to call her Alex. It's not that big a deal, Alexandra said, with the kind of false modesty that comes from being genuinely accomplished. Just sharing some techniques we've been developing. Not that big a deal. She was pioneering surgical techniques that would save children's lives, and she was modest about it. The conversation flowed around me like I wasn't there. Medical advances, legal precedents, art exhibitions, political developments, topics that required education, experience, cultural capital I'd never accumulated. When someone finally asked what I'd been up to, Victoria jumped in before I could answer. Michelle's been exploring her options, she said smoothly. Taking some classes, considering different career paths. It's wonderful when people take time to really think about their future. Taking time to think about their future. Like I was on some kind of spiritual journey instead of desperately trying to find work. That's smart, Alexandra said kindly. Career transitions can be so challenging. What field are you interested in? It was a genuine question, asked without judgment, but I felt like a child being quizzed by adults. I'm looking at hospitality management, I said. Customer service, guest relations, that sort of thing. How interesting, Alexandra replied. And she actually seemed to mean it. The service industry is so important. People really undervalue how much skill it takes to make others feel welcome and cared for. For a moment, I felt grateful to her for recognizing the legitimacy of service work. Then I realized that her kindness was actually making me feel worse, because it highlighted how different our situations were. She could afford to be generous about my career struggles, because she'd never had to worry about proving her worth to anyone. The dinner dragged on for 3 hours. By dessert, Alexandra and Ryan were deep in conversation about mutual friends from law school, people they'd known, places they'd traveled together. Victoria watched them with the kind of satisfied expression she usually reserved for successfully executed social maneuvers. It's so nice when old friends reconnect, she said to me quietly. They have so much history together. History. Unlike Ryan and me, who apparently had only the present, a present that was looking increasingly unstable. When we got home that night, Ryan was energized in a way I hadn't seen in months. It was great seeing Alex again, he said, loosening his tie. She hasn't changed at all. She seems lovely, I said, because what else could I say? She is. She's always been, I don't know. Driven, I guess. Focused on her goals. Driven, focused on her goals. Unlike his current wife, who was apparently wandering aimlessly through life. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd stayed together? I asked, immediately regretting the question. Ryan paused in the middle of hanging up his jacket. What do you mean? Nothing. Forget I asked. But he didn't let it go. Michelle, Alex, and I broke up for good reasons. We were too focused on our careers to make it work. Too focused on their careers. Both of them had careers worth focusing on. I'm not threatened by her, I said, which was a lie. I was absolutely threatened by her, but not in the way Ryan thought. I wasn't worried about him cheating or leaving me for his ex-girlfriend. I was threatened by what she represented. Proof that there was a version of Ryan's life where his wife was someone Victoria actually respected. Good, Ryan said, kissing my forehead in that absent way that had replaced real affection. Because you have nothing to worry about. But lying in bed that night, listening to Ryan's steady breathing beside me, I knew that wasn't true. I had everything to worry about, because I was slowly disappearing into the gap between who I was and who the Wellington family needed me to be. And the worst part was, I was starting to believe they were right. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning in March, almost exactly 1 year after I'd quit the spa. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop, scrolling through job listings that all seemed to require experience I didn't have or education I was still working toward. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code was San Francisco. I almost didn't answer. I'd gotten tired of explaining to telemarketers that I wasn't interested in whatever they were selling. Hello, is this Michelle Wellington? The woman's voice was professional but warm. Yes, this is Michelle. Hi, Michelle. My name is Miranda Chen. I'm the HR director for Lux Hospitality Group. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. Lux Hospitality Group. I knew the name. They owned some of the most exclusive hotels and resorts on the West Coast. Their flagship property in San Francisco was legendary, the kind of place where celebrities stayed and tech billionaires held private parties. Not at all, I said, grabbing a pen. How can I help you? Well, we received your application for our guest experience coordinator position, and I have to say, your background really caught our attention. My application, I vaguely remembered submitting it months ago, during one of my late-night job search binges. I'd probably applied to 50 positions that week. Most of them long shots. We're always looking for candidates with high-end service experience, Miranda continued. And your spa background is exactly what we value in hospitality. You understand luxury clientele, you know how to anticipate needs, and you have that hands-on experience with customer satisfaction. Someone was praising my spa experience, actually praising it, instead of treating it like something to overcome or apologize for. I'd love to learn more about the position, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Excellent. Let me tell you a bit about what we're looking for. The guest experience coordinator role is really about creating those memorable moments that set us apart from other luxury properties. You'd be working directly with our VIP guests, managing special requests, coordinating with all departments to ensure seamless service. It sounded incredible. More than that, it sounded like something I could actually be good at. The position is based at our San Francisco property, Miranda continued. I know that might require relocation, but we offer a comprehensive package, including moving expenses and temporary corporate housing while you get settled. San Francisco, 300 miles from the Wellington Mansion and Victoria's constant criticism. The salary range is $75,000 to $85,000 depending on experience, plus performance bonuses and full benefits. And there's significant room for advancement. Many of our senior managers started in guest services roles. $75,000. More money than I'd ever made, more than Ryan made in his first few years at the law firm. Plus the possibility of advancement, of building an actual career instead of just finding a job. Would you be interested in scheduling a phone interview? Miranda asked. I'd love to discuss your background in more detail. Absolutely, I said. When would work for you? We scheduled the interview for Thursday afternoon. After I hung up, I sat in the empty kitchen, staring at my notes from the conversation, afraid to believe this could be real, a legitimate opportunity, at a company that valued my experience instead of dismissing it, in a city where nobody knew me as Ryan's wife, or the massage therapist Victoria tolerates. For the first time in over a year, I felt something I'd almost forgotten: hope. The phone interview went better than I dared to imagine. Miranda and I talked for over an hour about guest service philosophy, luxury hospitality trends, and specific scenarios I'd handled with demanding clients. Every answer seemed to impress her more. Your spa background is such an asset, she said. You understand that luxury service is really about reading people, anticipating what they need before they ask for it. That's not something you can teach. It's intuitive. Intuitive. She was describing my work as intuitive, skilled, valuable. I have to ask, Miranda said toward the end of the interview, what's motivating your interest in relocating? Are you looking for a change of scenery, or is there something specific about San Francisco that appeals to you? The honest answer was that I was desperate to escape my current life, but that didn't seem professional. I'm excited about the growth opportunities, I said instead. The chance to work with Lux's caliber of clientele and really develop my career in hospitality management. That's exactly what we like to hear, Miranda replied. We're looking for people who see this as more than just a job, who want to build something long-term with us. Long-term, career development, professional growth. Words I hadn't heard applied to my future in over a year. I'll need to discuss this with my management team, Miranda said. But I'm very optimistic. You should hear from us by early next week. Thank you so much for your time, I said. This opportunity sounds incredible. After I hung up, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, afraid to move in case I somehow jinxed this chance. Then I realized I had a decision to make. Tell Ryan about the interview or wait to see if anything came of it. The smart thing would have been to wait, but I was so excited, so hopeful for the first time in months that I couldn't contain it. Ryan got home from work around 7, looking tired and stressed. He'd been working late more often lately, taking on extra cases to make partner track. How was your day? He asked, loosening his tie. Actually, I have some news, I said, trying not to grin like an idiot. I had a phone interview today. Oh yeah? For what? Guest experience coordinator at Lux Hospitality Group in San Francisco. Ryan paused in the middle of pouring himself a drink. San Francisco. I know it's far, but Ryan, this could be amazing. The salary is $75,000 to start, with room for advancement, and they actually want someone with my background. $75,000. Ryan's eyebrows shot up. That's really good money. I know. And they said my spa experience is exactly what they're looking for. Finally, someone who sees that as an asset instead of something to overcome. Ryan was quiet for a moment, processing. When would you start? I don't even have the job yet, I laughed. But if I get it, probably within a month or two. And I would, what? Move to San Francisco too? The question hung in the air between us. In all my excitement about the opportunity, I hadn't really thought through the logistics of what this would mean for our marriage. Well, yes, I said slowly. I mean, we'd figure it out. Maybe you could look for positions up there, or... Michelle. Ryan set down his drink and looked at me directly. I can't just pick up and move to San Francisco. I'm on partner track here. This is my career. His career. The implication was clear. My opportunity was just a job, but his work was a career. I know it would be complicated, I said, but maybe this is a chance for both of us to start fresh somewhere new. Start fresh? Ryan's voice had an edge I didn't recognize. Michelle, I've been working toward making partner for 5 years. I can't just throw that away to follow you to San Francisco. Follow you? Like I was asking him to abandon everything for some whim instead of a legitimate professional opportunity that could change our lives. I'm not asking you to throw anything away, I said carefully. I'm asking you to consider that this might be good for both of us. How would this be good for me? The question was so blunt, so focused on his needs instead of ours as a couple, that I felt something cold settle in my chest. Because I'd be happy, I said quietly. Because I'd be doing work I'm good at, making good money, building something for myself. Doesn't that matter? Ryan ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I recognized as his way of buying time when he didn't know how to respond. Of course it matters, he said finally. But you can build something here too. You're in school, you're developing new skills. Ryan, I've been job hunting for a year. This is the first real opportunity I've had, the first time someone has looked at my background and seen potential instead of problems. I know, and I'm happy for you, I really am, but asking me to leave everything I've worked for. What about everything I've worked for? The words came out sharper than I intended. What about the 5 years I spent building my practice, the reputation I had, the clients who trusted me? I gave all that up because your family made it clear it wasn't good enough. That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time you defended my work to your mother? When was the last time you introduced me to your colleagues without apologizing for what I do? Ryan was quiet, which was answer enough. This job could change everything for us, I continued. Financial independence, professional respect. A chance to prove that I'm more than just the girl who gives massages. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Yes, I do. The words exploded out of me. I have to prove it every day, at every family dinner, every social event, every time someone asks what I do for work and you change the subject. I'm tired of being your embarrassment, Ryan. You're not my embarrassment. But he said it too quickly, too defensively, and we both knew it wasn't true. The silence stretched between us, filled with everything we weren't saying. Finally, Ryan sighed. Let's see if you even get the job first, okay? Then we can figure out what it means. Let's see if you even get the job first. Like he was humoring me, like he didn't really believe this opportunity was real. Okay, I said, because what else could I say? But as I cleaned up the kitchen that night, I realized something had shifted between us. For the first time in our marriage, I had something that was entirely mine. An opportunity that didn't depend on his family's approval or his career needs. And his first instinct wasn't to support it, but to find reasons why it wouldn't work. Maybe that told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in Ryan Wellington's list of priorities. The job offer came 3 days later in the form of a formal email from Miranda Chen with an official offer letter attached. $78,000 to start, full benefits, moving allowance, and a clear path to advancement within the company. I printed the letter and read it 5 times, afraid it would disappear if I looked away. Then I called Miranda to accept. Wonderful, she said, and I could hear her genuine excitement through the phone. We're thrilled to have you join the team. When can you start? 2 weeks, I suggested, though I had no idea how I was going to extract myself from my life in LA in that time. Perfect. I'll send over all the paperwork and information about corporate housing. Michelle, I really think you're going to love it here. Love it here. When was the last time someone had said I would love something about my professional life? After I hung up, I sat with the offer letter in my hands, feeling something I hadn't experienced in over a year. Pride. Not the desperate, pleading pride of someone trying to prove their worth, but the quiet satisfaction of being genuinely valued. Ryan was working late again, so I had the house to myself for the evening. I walked through the rooms of the Wellington mansion, trying to imagine missing any of it. The perfectly appointed living room where I'd never felt comfortable sitting. The formal dining room where I'd endured countless dinners, feeling like an unwelcome guest. The kitchen where Victoria had laid out those mysterious papers just a week ago. A week. Had it really only been a week since I'd discovered Victoria preparing her birthday surprise? It felt like months. My birthday was tomorrow night. Victoria's carefully planned celebration at Skyline, with whatever revelation she'd been so excited to share. Part of me was curious about what she had planned, but mostly I felt detached from it all, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. Because in 2 weeks, this wouldn't be my life anymore. I'd be in San Francisco, starting fresh in a job that valued my skills, living in a place where nobody knew me as the massage therapist who married above her station. The irony was perfect. Victoria had spent 2 years trying to convince me I wasn't good enough for her family. Tomorrow night, I'd be able to tell her she was absolutely right. I was too good for them. When Ryan got home around 10, I was sitting in the living room with the offer letter beside me. "How was work?" I asked. "Long day," he said, collapsing into his father's old leather chair. "How was yours?" "I got the job." Ryan looked up sharply. "The San Francisco job? $78,000 to start. I can begin in 2 weeks." He stared at me for a long moment, like he was trying to process information that didn't fit his expectations. That's great, Michelle. Congratulations." But he didn't sound happy. He sounded like someone who'd just been told about a problem he didn't know how to solve. "Thank you," I said. "I'm really excited about it." "So you're definitely taking it?" "Yes." "And you want me to?" "I want you to be happy for me," I said. "I want you to recognize that this is a good thing, an opportunity for us to build something better. But if I can't leave my practice, then you can't leave your practice." The words hung between us, heavy with implication. "Michelle," Ryan said carefully, "what are you saying?" "I'm saying that for the first time in our marriage, I have something that's mine. Something that doesn't depend on your mother's approval or your family's acceptance, and I'm not giving it up." Ryan was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. "So this is really happening?" "Yes," I said. "This is really happening." We didn't talk about logistics that night, or timelines, or what this meant for our marriage. We went to bed in our respective rooms, him in his childhood bedroom, me in what had become my de facto guest quarters, and lay in the darkness thinking our own thoughts. But as I drifted off to sleep, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: anticipation for the future. Tomorrow was my birthday, Victoria's big surprise, whatever drama she had planned. But in 2 weeks, it would all be irrelevant, because I'd be somewhere else, building a life that was entirely my own. Victoria Wellington had spent 2 years trying to drive me away from her son. Tomorrow night, she'd finally succeed. Just not in the way she'd imagined. My 29th birthday dawned clear and warm, one of those perfect Los Angeles days that makes you understand why people move here despite the traffic and the cost of living. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat on the deck overlooking the Pacific, trying to absorb the fact that this was probably the last birthday I'd celebrate as Mrs. Ryan Wellington. The house was quiet. Ryan had left for work without saying goodbye, which had become his standard practice lately. No birthday kiss, no "have a good day," just the sound of his car pulling out of the driveway while I was still getting dressed. I spent the morning making lists, things to pack, accounts to close, people to notify about my move, the practical details of extracting myself from a life I'd never quite fit into anyway. My sister Kate called around noon. "Happy birthday, big sister," she said, her voice bright with genuine affection. "How does 29 feel?" "Different," I said, which was the understatement of the century. Different how? Kate was the only person I'd told about the job offer, partly because she lived in Sacramento and had never met the Wellington family, and partly because she was the only person I trusted to be unambiguously happy for me. "I think tonight's going to change everything," I said. "The fancy dinner Ryan's mom planned, among other things." Kate was quiet for a moment. She had a sixth sense about emotional undercurrents, probably from dealing with difficult customers in her marketing job. "Michelle," she said carefully, "is everything okay with you and Ryan? How do you explain to your sister that your marriage has been slowly suffocating under the weight of other people's expectations? How do you admit that the man you love has been gradually erasing you to make room for the version of yourself his family finds acceptable?" "We're figuring some things out," I said. "That doesn't sound okay." "It's not, but it might be soon." "Do you want me to drive down? I could be there in 4 hours." The offer was tempting. Kate was fiercely protective. The kind of person who would cheerfully tell Victoria Wellington exactly what she thought of her behavior. But tonight wasn't about having backup or moral support. Tonight was about standing on my own. Thanks, but I need to handle this myself. Handle what? Michelle, you're scaring me a little. Don't be scared, I said, and I meant it. I think I'm finally going to stop being scared. The afternoon dragged by in a haze of nervous energy. I tried to read, to watch TV, to do anything that would distract me from thinking about what was coming. But my mind kept circling back to Victoria's satisfied expression when she'd hidden those papers. Ryan's secretive excitement. The feeling that everyone knew something I didn't. Around 4, I started getting ready for dinner. I chose a navy blue dress I'd bought for a law firm event last year. Sophisticated but not flashy. Expensive enough to fit in with Victoria's crowd, but not so formal that I'd look like I was trying too hard. Looking at myself in the mirror, I tried to see what the Wellington family saw when they looked at me. Someone who didn't quite belong? Someone playing dress-up in a world she didn't understand? Or just someone who'd never been given a real chance to prove her worth? After tonight, it wouldn't matter anymore. Ryan got home around 6, looking nervous and excited in a way I hadn't seen since our engagement. "Ready for your birthday dinner?" he asked, straightening his tie. "As ready as I can be," I said. "You look beautiful." The compliment sounded automatic, the kind of thing husbands are supposed to say, but there was something in his eyes that reminded me of the man I'd fallen in love with. For a moment, I wondered if I was making a mistake, if we could somehow find our way back to who we used to be. Then Victoria appeared in the doorway, perfectly dressed and impeccably made up, carrying a small wrapped box. "Happy birthday, dear," she said, kissing the air near my cheek in her typical fashion. "A little something to wear tonight." Inside the box was a pair of diamond earrings, not huge, but clearly expensive. The kind of gift that would photograph well and make it look like she'd spent real money on me. "They're beautiful," I said, which was true. "Thank you." "They were my mother's," Victoria said, watching my reaction carefully. I thought it was time they had a new home. Her mother's earrings. Either this was a genuine gesture of acceptance, or it was part of whatever performance she had planned for tonight. "I'm honored," I said, putting them on. They felt heavy against my earlobes, like a weight I wasn't sure I could carry. "Perfect," Victoria said with satisfaction. "Now we look like a proper family." Proper family. There was that phrase again, the standard by which the Wellingtons measured everyone and everything. The drive to Skyline was quiet, filled with the kind of nervous energy that builds before important conversations or major announcements. Victoria sat in the front seat next to Ryan, occasionally turning back to make small talk about the restaurant, the view, how excited she was for tonight. "I've invited a few friends," she said casually. "I hope you don't mind, Michelle. I thought it would be nice to have some people there to help celebrate. A few friends." Victoria's idea of a few friends usually meant half the Malibu social scene. "That sounds lovely," I said, because what else could I say? Skyline occupied the top floor of one of downtown LA's newest buildings, all glass and steel with panoramic views of the city sprawling out in every direction. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt endless, like ascending to some rarefied atmosphere where different rules applied. The hostess greeted Victoria by name and led us through the main dining room to a private section that had been reserved for our party. And it was definitely a party. There had to be 30 people there, all dressed in expensive clothes and talking in the loud, confident voices of people who'd never worried about money or social status. I recognized most of them: Dr. Manning and her husband, Sandra Cross, with her latest boyfriend, Elena Rodriguez, talking animatedly with a man I didn't know. Ryan's colleagues from the law firm, Victoria's country club friends, neighbors from the most exclusive parts of Malibu. And sitting at the bar, looking perfectly at ease in a way I'd never managed to achieve, was Alexandra Morrison. "Alex," Ryan's face lit up as he spotted his ex-girlfriend. "I didn't know you were going to be here." "Your mother invited me," Alexandra said with a warm smile. She thought it would be nice to reconnect with old friends. Old friends, right. Victoria appeared at my elbow with a champagne flute. "I hope you don't mind that I invited Alexandra," she said in a low voice. "She's been such a good friend to the family over the years." Such a good friend to the family, unlike me, who had apparently been more of a project than a member. "Of course not," I said, accepting the champagne. "The more the merrier." The next hour passed in a blur of small talk and forced smiles. People wished me happy birthday with the kind of polite enthusiasm reserved for people you don't really know, but feel obligated to acknowledge. I found myself gravitating toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. From up here, LA looked manageable, even beautiful. The traffic and chaos reduced to distant streams of light, the sprawl organized into neat geometric patterns. It was easy to forget from this height how hard it could be to navigate the streets below. "Quite a view," said a voice beside me. I turned to find Dr. Manning's husband, Robert, holding his own glass of champagne and looking out at the skyline. "It's incredible," I agreed. "Victoria certainly knows how to pick a venue," he continued. Though I have to say, I was surprised when she told us about tonight's celebration. Celebration. The way he said it made it sound like something other than a birthday party. "Oh," Robert gave me a look that might have been sympathy or pity, I couldn't tell which. "Well," he said carefully, "these kinds of transitions are never easy, but sometimes they're necessary." Transitions. What kind of transition required a party at the most expensive restaurant in downtown LA? Before I could ask what he meant, Victoria appeared with a small silver bell, the kind they use at fancy events to call for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice carrying clearly across the private dining area, "if I could have everyone's attention for just a moment." The conversation died down as 30 pairs of eyes turned toward Victoria, who stood at the head of our table with the kind of confident posture that comes from years of running social events. "First," she began, "I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight to celebrate Michelle's birthday. It means so much to have our closest friends here for such an important occasion." Important occasion. There was that phrase again, loaded with meaning I didn't understand. "Michelle has been part of our family for 3 years now," Victoria continued, her voice warm and maternal in a way I'd never heard her use when talking about me. "And during that time, we've all grown to care about her deeply. Care about me deeply." The words sounded genuine, but I could see something flickering behind Victoria's eyes. Anticipation, maybe, or satisfaction. "Which is why," she continued, reaching into her purse, "I wanted to share something special with all of you tonight." The gold envelope appeared in her hands, the same one I'd seen her preparing days ago. My stomach clenched as she held it up for everyone to see. "A gift," she announced, "from our entire family to Michelle. Something we hope will help her find the happiness she deserves." The happiness she deserves. Why did that sound like goodbye? Victoria walked over to where I was sitting and placed the envelope in front of me with ceremonial precision. The gold foil caught the restaurant's ambient lighting, making it look even more expensive and thoughtful than it had in our kitchen. "Go ahead, dear," Victoria urged, and I could hear phones coming out, people positioning themselves for photos. "Open it." 30 people watched as I turned the envelope over in my hands. Ryan had his phone out too, recording, his expression excited and nervous. Alexandra was watching with polite interest, probably wondering why she'd been invited to witness someone else's birthday gift opening. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, like it contained something more substantial than a typical present. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out what looked like official documents, legal documents. The words at the top of the first page seemed to grow larger as I stared at them. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Divorce papers. Victoria had given me divorce papers as a birthday gift. In front of 30 people, at the most exclusive restaurant in the city. The silence in the room was absolute, like someone had pressed a mute button on the entire world. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for my reaction, probably expecting tears or shock or some kind of dramatic breakdown. Instead, I felt something completely unexpected. Relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. "Well," Victoria prompted, her voice bright with false cheer. "What do you think?" I looked up at her, this woman who had spent 3 years making me feel inadequate, who had systematically undermined my confidence and questioned my worth, who thought she was delivering the ultimate humiliation by ending my marriage in front of an audience, and I smiled. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the hushed room, "this is perfect timing." Victoria's satisfied expression faltered slightly. "I beg your pardon," I stood up, still holding the divorce papers, and looked around at all these people who had watched me struggle to fit into their world for 3 years. I said this is perfect timing, I repeated, louder now. Because I have some news to share too. Reaching into my purse, I pulled out my own envelope, the job offer letter from Lux Hospitality Group, with its official letterhead and impressive salary figure. 3 days ago, I announced to the room, I was offered a position as guest experience coordinator at Lux Hospitality Group in San Francisco. $78,000 to start, with full benefits and advancement opportunities. The silence that followed was different now, shocked instead of expectant. The position starts in 2 weeks, I continued, and they specifically sought me out because of my spa background. Apparently, there are people who value hands-on service experience instead of seeing it as something to overcome. Victoria's face had gone pale, her mouth slightly open like she was trying to process information that didn't fit her expectations. So thank you, Victoria, I said, holding up the divorce papers. This is actually the most generous gift you could have given me, freedom to accept a job that recognizes my worth, in a city where nobody knows me as the massage therapist who married above her station. Dr. Manning's husband started laughing, a low chuckle that grew louder as he realized what had just happened. Other people began to whisper, some pulling out phones to capture what was rapidly becoming the most dramatic birthday party any of them had ever witnessed. You planned this, Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. I planned nothing, I replied. You did all the planning, Victoria. The venue, the guest list, the dramatic presentation. All I did was accept a job offer from people who actually appreciate my skills. Ryan was staring at me like I was a stranger, his phone still recording, but his face showing confusion instead of excitement. Michelle, he started, but I held up my hand. No, Ryan, you've made your choice. Your career, your family's approval, your mother's vision of who you should marry, those have always been more important than supporting your actual wife. The words felt good coming out, like releasing pressure that had been building for years. Ladies and gentlemen, I continued, addressing the room, thank you for coming to witness my liberation. Please enjoy the rest of the evening. I have packing to do. I signed the divorce papers right there at the table, using the expensive pen Victoria had thoughtfully provided. Then I took off her mother's diamond earrings and set them gently beside my signature. These should probably stay in the family, I said. The walk to the elevator felt like the longest and shortest journey of my life. Behind me, I could hear the buzz of conversation starting up again. People processing what they'd just witnessed, probably already composing the stories they'd tell at their next social gatherings. But I didn't look back. I kept my eyes on the elevator doors, on the numbers counting down from 42, on the future that was finally, completely mine. As the elevator descended toward street level, I pulled out my phone and called Miranda Chen. Miranda? It's Michelle Wellington. Well, Michelle Mitchell again, actually. I was wondering, would it be possible to start next Monday instead of in 2 weeks? I find myself suddenly very available. Her laughter was warm and delighted. Michelle, what happened? Let's just say my schedule cleared up unexpectedly. I'm ready to start my new life whenever you'll have me. Monday it is, Miranda said. Welcome to San Francisco. The elevator doors opened onto the bustling street level, where normal people were going about their Friday night routines, unaware that someone's entire life had just been transformed 42 floors above them. I walked out into the Los Angeles night, breathing in air that tasted like freedom, carrying nothing but my purse and the certain knowledge that Victoria Wellington had just handed me the greatest gift of my life. She'd tried to destroy me in front of an audience. Instead, she'd freed me to become exactly who I was meant to be. The aftermath was swift and surgical, like cutting away dead tissue to let healthy growth begin. By Sunday morning, I'd packed everything that mattered into 2 suitcases and a handful of boxes. It was remarkable how little I actually owned in that mansion, how few things in those perfectly appointed rooms belonged to me, rather than to the Wellington family legacy. Ryan tried to stop me as I loaded my car, standing in the circular driveway, looking lost and confused. Michelle, wait, he called. Can't we talk about this? I paused with my hand on the car door. What's left to talk about, Ryan? This is all happening so fast. Maybe we could try counseling or... Counseling? I turned to face him fully. Ryan, your mother served me divorce papers at my birthday party, and you recorded it for entertainment. What exactly do you think counseling is going to fix? He had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't know she was going to do it like that. But you knew she was going to do it. Ryan's silence was answer enough. For how long? I asked. How long have you all been planning this? It wasn't planned, he said weakly. Mom just thought, we all thought maybe it would be better if I disappeared quietly so you could find someone more suitable. That's not what this was about. But we both knew it was exactly what this was about. Victoria appeared in the doorway, perfectly dressed even on a Sunday morning, watching our conversation with the wary expression of someone who'd miscalculated badly. Michelle, she called, her voice lacking its usual commanding tone. Perhaps we could discuss this like adults. We did discuss it, I replied. On Friday night, in front of 30 witnesses. I believe your exact words were that this would help me find the happiness I deserve. Victoria's mouth tightened. Even she couldn't deny what had happened. You don't have to leave like this, Ryan said. We could figure something out. Ryan, I said gently, your family spent 3 years making it clear I wasn't good enough for you. Turns out you were all right, just not in the way you thought. I got in my car and rolled down the window. I'm not good enough to be diminished by people who can't recognize worth when it's standing right in front of them. I'm not good enough to beg for acceptance from people who've already decided I don't deserve it. Ryan stepped closer to the car. What if things could be different? They could have been different, I said. 3 years ago, 2 years ago, even last week. But you chose your family's approval over your wife's dignity, and some choices can't be undone. I drove away without looking back, leaving the Wellington mansion and everything it represented in my rearview mirror. The drive to San Francisco took 6 hours through some of the most beautiful scenery in California. I stopped in Paso Robles for lunch, sitting at a roadside diner and eating a burger that tasted better than any meal I'd had at the country club. For the first time in 3 years, I was eating alone by choice, instead of sitting in uncomfortable silence while other people made decisions about my life. My phone buzzed constantly during the drive. Texts from Ryan, voicemails from Victoria, even a few messages from people who'd been at the restaurant wanting to know if I was okay. I turned it off somewhere around San Luis Obispo and drove the rest of the way in blessed silence. Miranda had arranged for me to stay in corporate housing in Soma, a furnished studio apartment in a converted warehouse building, all exposed brick and industrial fixtures. It was smaller than my walk-in closet at the Wellington mansion, but it felt bigger because every inch of it was mine. That first night, I ordered Chinese takeout and sat on the floor eating lo mein straight from the container while looking out at the city lights. No crystal glasses, no proper table settings, no conversation about people and places I didn't care about. Just me, my dinner, and the understanding that this was what freedom tasted like. Miranda met me at the hotel Monday morning with a smile that could have powered the entire building. Michelle, you look fantastic. Ready for your first day? I was wearing a simple black dress I'd bought at Nordstrom. Professional but not stuffy, expensive but not showy. The kind of outfit that said competent instead of trying too hard. More than ready, I said, and meant it. The Luxe San Francisco was everything I'd imagined and more. 28 floors of understated elegance in the heart of the financial district, with views of the Bay and clientele that included tech executives, international diplomats, and celebrities who valued privacy above publicity. My training started immediately with Elena Vasquez, the guest services manager who would be my direct supervisor. Elena was maybe 40, with the kind of polished competence that comes from years in high-end hospitality. The most important thing to understand, she explained as we toured the property, is that our guests aren't just paying for a room. They're paying for an experience, for the feeling that every detail has been anticipated and handled. It was exactly what I'd been doing at the spa, just on a larger scale. My first week flew by in a blur of training sessions, property tours, and shadowing experience coordinators. I learned the preferences of regular guests, the relationships between different departments, the delicate art of making extraordinary requests seem effortlessly manageable. Mrs. Patterson in the penthouse wants her usual Wednesday afternoon tea service, Elena told me during my second week. But she's mentioned she's feeling homesick for her childhood in Ireland. Think you can handle that? This was a test, and I knew it. Anyone could arrange tea service. Making someone feel connected to their childhood required intuition and creativity. I spent an hour researching traditional Irish tea time customs, then coordinated with the kitchen to prepare proper Irish breakfast tea, soda bread, and Barry's tea biscuits. But the real touch was the small bouquet of shamrocks I had delivered from a specialty florist, arranged in a simple ceramic pot that Mrs. Patterson could take home. When Elena checked on the service later, she found Mrs. Patterson in tears. Happy tears. She said it was like having tea with her grandmother again, Elena reported back to me. How did you know about the shamrocks? Lucky guess, I said. Though it wasn't luck at all. It was the same intuitive understanding of what people needed that I'd developed during 5 years of massage therapy, applied to a different context. That wasn't luck, Elena said with a knowing smile. That was expertise. Expertise. Someone was calling my instincts expertise instead of common sense or natural ability. By my 4th week, I was handling VIP requests independently. A tech CEO who needed a last-minute birthday party for 50 people in his suite. A diplomat's wife who wanted to surprise her husband with authentic French pastries from his hometown. A celebrity couple who needed complete privacy during a difficult time in their marriage. Each challenge felt like a puzzle I was uniquely qualified to solve. My spa background had taught me to read people's unspoken needs, to anticipate problems before they became crises, to make difficult people feel cared for instead of managed. The other coordinators began asking for my input on their challenging guests. Elena started assigning me the most demanding clients, the ones who'd made previous staff members cry or quit. Michelle has a gift, she told Miranda during my 6-week review. She doesn't just solve problems, she makes people feel understood. My first performance review was everything I dreamed of during those months of job hunting rejections. Outstanding customer satisfaction scores, Miranda read from my file. Multiple guest commendations. Elena says you're ready for increased responsibilities. I love this work, I told her. It feels like what I was meant to be doing. Good, because we have a proposition for you. Our Seattle property is opening next year, and we need someone to help develop the guest services program. It would mean a promotion to senior coordinator, salary bump to $85,000, and significant input into how we approach luxury hospitality at the new location. $85,000, more money than I'd ever imagined making, doing work that energized instead of exhausted me. I'd love to be considered, I said. You already are, Miranda smiled. The position is yours if you want it. Walking back to my apartment that evening, I felt something I'd almost forgotten existed. Pride in my professional life. Not the desperate pride of someone trying to prove their worth, but the quiet satisfaction of being genuinely valued for skills I'd worked years to develop. My phone had been buzzing all day with messages I hadn't bothered to check. Now, riding the elevator up to my studio, I finally looked at the notifications. 17 missed calls from Ryan, 12 text messages, 3 voicemails from Victoria. Even a message from Marcus, Ryan's brother, asking if I was doing okay. I deleted them all without reading or listening. But there was one message that caught my attention, from Dr. Manning, of all people. Michelle, her voicemail began. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I got your number from Ryan. I wanted to say that what you did at the restaurant was, well, it was impressive. I've been thinking about that job you mentioned, and I realized I owe you an apology for how we've all behaved. If you're ever back in LA, I'd love to take you to lunch and hear about your new life. You deserve better than what you got from us. Dr. Manning's apology was unexpected, but not enough to change anything. The damage had been done by years of small cruelties and systematic dismissal, not by any single person or incident. But it was interesting to know that at least one person in Victoria's circle had recognized what really happened that night. 3 months into my new life, I was walking through Union Square when I ran into someone from my past, Jennifer Walsh, one of my former spa clients who'd moved to San Francisco for work. Michelle, she called out, crossing the street to reach me. Oh my God, I can't believe you're here. How are you? Jennifer looked exactly the same, stressed, expensive suit, the posture of someone carrying too much responsibility. I'm great, I said, and realized I actually meant it. Living in Soma now, working in hospitality management. That's amazing. You always had such incredible instincts about what people needed. I bet you're fantastic at it. We went for coffee at a nearby cafe, and Jennifer caught me up on her life. Still working in finance, still struggling with stress, still dealing with the shoulder problems that had brought her to elite wellness in the first place. "I've been seeing other therapists," she said, "but nobody's ever been as good as you were. You had this way of knowing exactly what was wrong and how to fix it." "That's very kind of you to say. I'm serious. You changed my quality of life in ways I'm still grateful for. And now, you're doing that for people in a different context." Jennifer's words stayed with me long after we parted ways. For years, I'd let the Wellington family convince me that my work wasn't valuable, that using my hands to help people was somehow lesser than using my mind or my connections. But Jennifer was right. I'd been changing people's quality of life all along. The medium had changed, but the essential skill remained the same: seeing what people needed and finding ways to provide it. 6 months after the birthday dinner disaster, I was promoted to Senior Guest Experience Coordinator with a corner office on the 15th floor and a view of the Bay Bridge. The new business cards were simple but elegant. Michelle Mitchell, Senior Coordinator, Lux Hospitality Group. Michelle Mitchell. It felt good to see my maiden name in professional context again, like reclaiming a piece of identity I'd temporarily misplaced. Elena knocked on my office door that afternoon, holding an envelope with the Lux Company logo. "This came for you," she said. "Looks official." Inside was a letter from the corporate office in Los Angeles, signed by the CEO himself. "Ms. Mitchell," it read, "your exceptional performance in San Francisco has not gone unnoticed. We would like to offer you the position of Director of Guest Experience for our new flagship property in Seattle, opening fall 2024. This role includes oversight of all guest services operations, staff development responsibilities, and input into property design and amenities planning. Starting salary, $125,000 annually, plus performance bonuses and full executive benefits package. $125,000. Director-level position. Executive benefits. I read the letter 3 times before the reality sank in. Less than a year ago, I'd been unemployed, living in my in-laws' house, begging for entry-level positions that paid a third of what I was now being offered. The woman who'd been told she wasn't qualified for administrative assistant roles was being recruited to run guest services for an entire luxury property. "Good news?" Elena asked, noticing my expression. "The best," I said. That evening, I celebrated alone in my studio apartment with a bottle of wine I'd bought months ago but never opened. As the sun set over San Francisco Bay, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I thought about the path that had brought me here. Victoria Wellington had tried to destroy me in the most public, humiliating way possible. She'd gathered an audience to witness what she thought would be my complete devastation. The final proof that I'd never been worthy of her family. Instead, she'd freed me to discover just how much I was actually worth. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago. Ryan had tried to contest it initially, probably at Victoria's urging, but there wasn't much to fight about. I wanted nothing from the Wellington estate, no alimony, no shared assets. Just my freedom and the right to use my maiden name again. The last communication I'd received from that family was a brief email from Marcus, Ryan's brother, who'd somehow gotten my work address. "Michelle," he wrote, "I know it's probably too little too late, but I wanted you to know that not everyone in our family agreed with what happened. You deserved better from all of us. I hope you're happy wherever you are." It was a kind gesture, but ultimately irrelevant. Their approval or disapproval no longer had any bearing on my life. A year after that birthday dinner, I was featured in a hospitality industry magazine as one of 30 under 30 rising stars in luxury service. The article included a photo of me in my Seattle office, which was still under construction but already impressive. The interviewer asked about my background, and I found myself telling the story of my transition from massage therapy to hotel management. "A lot of people don't realize how transferable those skills are," I explained. "Whether you're working with someone's physical tension or their travel stress, it's all about reading people, anticipating needs, creating an environment where they can relax and trust that they're being taken care of." What advice would you give to other people looking to make major career transitions? I thought about that question for a long time before answering. "Don't let other people's limited vision define your potential," I said finally. "Sometimes the people who claim to know you best are actually the least qualified to judge what you're capable of achieving." The article was published 3 months later. I'd forgotten about it entirely until my assistant mentioned that someone had called asking for me specifically, saying they'd seen the magazine piece. "A Mr. Wellington," she said. "He seemed very eager to speak with you." Ryan had tracked me down through a professional magazine. After 18 months of silence, he'd seen evidence of my success and decided he wanted to talk. I had my assistant tell him I was unavailable. Some bridges, once burned, aren't worth rebuilding. Instead, I focused on the work that had given me back my sense of purpose. The Seattle property was opening in 6 months, and I had a team to hire, systems to develop, a reputation to establish in a new market. For the first time in my adult life, the future felt entirely mine to shape. Victoria Wellington had handed me divorce papers on my 29th birthday, expecting to watch me collapse under the weight of public humiliation. Instead, she'd given me the push I needed to discover just how high I could rise when I stopped trying to make myself small enough to fit into other people's expectations. The best revenge, it turned out, wasn't causing them pain. It was proving they'd never deserved me in the first place. 2 years after that night at Skyline, I was standing in the lobby of our new Seattle flagship, watching my team handle the chaos of opening week with the kind of seamless professionalism that takes months to develop. "Ms. Mitchell?" My assistant appeared at my elbow. "There's someone here to see you. She says she's from Los Angeles, that you know each other?" I looked across the marble expanse of our lobby and felt my stomach drop. Victoria Wellington stood near the concierge desk, perfectly dressed as always, looking slightly out of place among the tech executives and international business travelers who made up our typical clientele. She spotted me at the same moment and walked over with the kind of determined stride I remembered from family gatherings, where she was about to make a point. "Hello, Michelle," she said when she reached me. "It's Ms. Mitchell," I corrected automatically. "And this is unexpected." Victoria glanced around the lobby, taking in the soaring ceilings, the understated luxury, the obvious success of what I'd built here. "It's quite impressive," she admitted. "Your hotel?" "Thank you. What brings you to Seattle?" Victoria was quiet for a moment, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked uncertain. "I wanted to apologize," she said finally. The words hung between us in the busy lobby, almost drowned out by the sounds of guests checking in and staff moving efficiently through their routines. "Apologize for what, specifically?" I asked. "For..." Victoria paused, clearly struggling with unfamiliar territory. "For not recognizing your potential. For treating you as if you weren't worthy of our family, when it's clear that we weren't worthy of you." It was the closest thing to a genuine apology I'd ever heard from Victoria Wellington, and it came about 2 years too late to matter. "I appreciate you saying that," I said, "but I'm not sure what you're hoping to accomplish." "Ryan is miserable," she said, cutting straight to what I suspected was the real reason for her visit. "He's been miserable since you left. He made partner last year, but it doesn't seem to bring him any joy." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" Victoria's eyes searched my face. "Sorry, I mean." I considered the question seriously. Was I sorry that Ryan was unhappy? Once upon a time, his happiness had been one of my primary concerns. But that woman who'd twisted herself into knots trying to earn the Wellington family's approval felt like a stranger now. "I'm sorry that he's not happy," I said finally. "But I'm not responsible for fixing it. He wants to see you, to talk. Then he can call me himself, through proper channels." Victoria nodded, accepting the boundary I'd drawn. "You've done well for yourself," she said, looking around the lobby again. "Better than any of us predicted. Better than any of you allowed me to believe I could do." The words were pointed but not cruel. A simple statement of fact that Victoria couldn't argue with. "Yes," she said quietly. "That's true." We stood there for a moment in the midst of all that expensive bustle, two women who'd once been family looking at each other across a gulf that couldn't be bridged by apologies or regret. "I should get back to work," I said finally. "Of course. Thank you for seeing me." Victoria turned to leave, then paused and looked back. "For what it's worth," she said, "I was wrong about you, completely wrong." I watched her walk away across the marble floor, her expensive heels clicking against stone that had been chosen by the woman she'd once dismissed as unworthy of professional consideration. Being right felt better than I'd expected, but not in the way I thought it would. There was no rush of vindictive pleasure, no sense of victory over a fallen enemy, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that my worth had never been dependent on her recognition. My assistant appeared beside me again. "Everything all right?" "Perfect," I said, and meant it. That evening, alone in my corner office with its view of Elliott Bay, I finally allowed myself to think about the journey that had brought me here. From that morning 3 years ago when I'd discovered Victoria preparing mysterious paperwork to this moment, running a multi-million-dollar hospitality operation and being courted by competitors who wanted to steal me away with even better offers. The woman who'd been told she wasn't qualified for entry-level administrative work was now being headhunted by luxury hotel chains across the country. Victoria Wellington had given me divorce papers as a birthday gift, expecting to watch me crumble. Instead, she'd handed me the key to becoming exactly who I was meant to be. Some gifts, it turns out, are more valuable than the giver ever intended. The best revenge isn't making your enemies suffer. It's building a life so fulfilling that their opinions become irrelevant. And as I looked out at the Seattle skyline, planning the next phase of my career, I realized that Victoria Wellington had given me the greatest gift of all, the motivation to prove that I was worth so much more than she'd ever imagined. The massage therapist who wasn't good enough for the Wellington family had become someone they'd never be able to afford. And that felt like the perfect ending to a story that had really been about new beginnings all along.